Hello again! In this video, I am fulfilling yet another request that came from a friend. It makes me happy because I know I can ask for something in return. What it will be, I'm not sure yet, but I'll come up with something. The country of Switzerland is synonymous with the concept of neutrality today. We are accustomed to the fact that the Swiss simply do not go to war. However, this was not always the case. Mercenaries from these lands were famous in previous historical eras, not to mention that permanent neutrality does not mean that you don't have a well-equipped military. Switzerland is an interesting case, so we should indeed take a look at how the country was formed and how it became the symbol of neutrality, and of not always perfectly clean finance. Let's see what we can find out. 1,000 years ago, this region was part of the Holy Roman Empire. It was ruled by noble houses like the Habsburgs and the Hohenstaufen, and by bishops who controlled individual towns and localities. Internal borders kept changing due to ongoing conflicts, but in the 1300s, a confederacy was formed by 8 cantons, who gradually pushed the Habsburgs out, then defeated the Burgundians in the 15th century, expanding their own territory. In 1499, they won the Swabian War, gaining independence, although on paper they remained part of the empire. Throughout this period, their mercenaries, the famous Swiss pikemen, were regarded as the best soldiers in Europe. They rarely lost in battle. By 1513, the number of cantons increased to 13. After that, the confederacy would remain basically the same until Napoleon's invasion in 1798. Reformation divided the population. It eventually led to a civil war between the Protestant and Catholic factions, who frequently allied themselves to foreign powers. When the 30 Years' War ended in 1648, full independence was granted. This was followed by a peasant war and an attempt by Protestant Zurich to restructure the federation. It was blocked by the Catholics, who won a major battle, and internal division continued even after a Protestant victory in 1712. The individual cantons were very different from each other, central administration was impossible, and while the Protestant cities were economically more powerful, the Catholic countryside also remained strong. By the 1650s, France was becoming the dominant power in Europe. It signed a treaty with the Confederacy that granted special rights to Swiss mercenaries and promised French neutrality in internal religious conflicts. The Catholic cantons signed a new treaty with France that essentially made it the guarantor of their independence, but this was removed in 1777. Over the centuries, a local aristocracy formed, with fewer than 200 families controlling key positions, although their status was primarily based on wealth, and new members were continually accepted. Internal conflicts did not cease. In some towns, religious factions fought each other. Elsewhere, the German and French-speaking population were trying to weaken the other's positions. In 1798, the French Revolutionary Army invaded Switzerland and turned it into a new republic with more central authority. This was resented by the local population. Many of these subsequent reforms were repealed later on, as the Congress of Vienna restored Swiss independence in 1814, also adding Geneva and 2 other areas to the new federation. One important reason for the great powers to support Swiss neutrality was the number of important Swiss trade routes connecting all 4 corners of the continent, but they also didn't want to see their rivals taking over the country. A new constitution centralized the government, protected trade, while removing some reforms like Jewish emancipation. In 1847, a brief civil war erupted, with the quick defeat of the Catholics, who were then invited to participate in more reforms, which finally reduced tension. A federal constitution was accepted in 1848, which served as the basis for further improvements regarding national defense, trade, and legal matters. In the 20th century, Swiss neutrality was respected by all nations. The country profited greatly from the 2 world wars, although in the second conflict, its trade was blockaded by both sides. For a brief moment, German takeover, a sort of second Anschluss, seemed possible, but by that time, the strong national identity of the Swiss prevented this. By 1942, Switzerland was completely surrounded by the Axis powers, so it had to trade with them, exporting machine tools, electricity, and dairy products. At the same time, both the Allies and the Axis sold large amounts of gold, even from victims of the Holocaust, to the Swiss National Bank. The population was somewhat divided over the war. The German-speaking portion was more sympathetic to Nazi Germany, while the French-speaking part was pro-Allies. Still, the country remained neutral, accepting around 300,000 refugees, civilians and soldiers alike. During the Cold War, building a Swiss nuclear bomb was considered, but then the idea was dropped due to budget issues. The country's special situation sometimes produced weird results. For example, women's suffrage was only introduced in 1971, with equal rights being added in 1981. After a failed referendum in 1986, Switzerland finally joined the UN in 2002, and while it is not a member of the European Union, it has joined the Schengen Treaty and the Dublin Convention. Quotas on immigration were reinstituted in 2014, which goes against the EU's principle on the freedom of movement. Switzerland remains neutral today, but we should note that it has a relatively large military, as the country favors armed neutrality. The famous Swiss mercenaries of previous eras, who served in the Italian and German wars, in the French, Spanish, Dutch and British armies, are gone, but the Swiss Guard is still in the Vatican, protecting the Pope. Although Switzerland is not in NATO, they are part of the Partnership for Peace program and participate in peacekeeping missions. All able-bodied males are conscripted into the army, while women can volunteer. They constitute less than 1% of active personnel. After 1989, referendums were held on whether to abolish the defense forces, but the vast majority voted against the notion. At the same time, manpower was gradually reduced from 400,000 to 100,000. We all know that the region has lots of beautiful mountains, valleys and lakes, but the country also possesses a vast network of bunkers and fortresses built into the mountainside, originally against a possible German invasion. But during the Cold War, radiation and blast shelters were also constructed to protect the Swiss population from a nuclear explosion. Some of these are popular tourist destinations, while others are still closed to the public. Switzerland has participated in several international missions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo and Afghanistan with a small number of soldiers, but they also monitor the armistice and the DMZ between the two Koreas. In most cases, they avoided direct confrontation with hostile forces and did not even arm the members of their delegations, somewhat preserving their focus on armed neutrality. This concept will most likely not change anytime soon. It is probably the best option for the country anyway. This concludes my brief summary on Swiss history and neutrality. Let's see what I can get in return for making this video. See you in the next one.